Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, what is the outlook for energy prices? You'll want to stay tuned for that. But first, we have our all-star business panel with Fred Anton and Gene Barr, and they'll join me in a moment.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, here we go again. I'm losing count now of the days. My guests are smiling here. It's a serious subject, but how long does this budget crisis go on? We now have a situation where schools are going to start to announce, we think, closings, staff cutbacks, human services are being damaged. This is a very serious and growing problem. Joining me to talk about that, Fred Anton and Gene Barr. Fred, of course, is the CEO of the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, and Gene Barr is the president and CEO of the PA Chamber of Business and Industry. We got those long titles over with, but we're always glad to have. All right, I'm going to ask both of you the same question. I'll start with Gene, then I'll go to Fred. Gene, look, they can't agree. There's real pain now. It's coming. Should they do a stopgap and at least not make these folks feel this pain?
Absolutely. It should have been done before. Understand there are real differences between where the legislature is and where the governor is. That could have been handled with a blue lining of the budget, as Governor Rendell did in his first year. The legislature, again, passed other stopgaps. It should be done because you're absolutely right. We are seeing social service organizations that are starting to close their doors, have to cut back services, which is a real problem. And as you mentioned, the schools are those dollars are beginning to dry up. Just this week, the governor said he was stopping some of the gambling money that goes to charter schools. So we're seeing all of that happen. So absolutely, yes, there should be a way of reducing the pain that the Pennsylvania citizens are seeing.
Fred.
The number one responsibility of government is to provide reliable services in accord with their mission. Mm-hmm. These amounts are routine. They are not disputed. Neither side, either in Harrisburg or Washington, should be able to hold up normal services of government, which are essential to our citizens. I'm an advocate of smaller government, but I recognize government has an important function to play, and anyone who disrupts that should get blamed. Now, the problem here is the public is not sophisticated enough to realize that the Republican Party wanted to go on with these services by a stopgap budget, and Wolf is using them as a device to get the budget passed. So everyone's going to get the blame. However, the constituencies that are the largest are the Democratic constituencies that rely more on some of these governmental services and the poor who rely on them. And they are the supporters of Governor Wolf.
Gene, is it going to take, in the past, and both you and Fred have been around through a number of these, there have been demonstrations and people packed into the state capitol. I mean, some of them got a little raucous. I'm not saying they did anything illegal. They just got raucous, right?
Sure, absolutely.
Is it going to take that?
You know, I don't know. It's funny when you go back and look at previous years, this has been much more muted, perhaps for some of the reasons that Fred has talked about, some of the political reasons and the differences in the legislature and of course the makeup. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to take. It's strange. We are as far apart now as we were back in April and May. There's been no advancement whatsoever. I mean, the governor says he's holding out for a budget that is common sense and balanced. And look, I agree with that. But the reality is, he says we're losing our credit rating. We're losing our credit rating because we haven't fixed the pension problem. If you look at Moody's and Fitch's and all these people who look at where Pennsylvania is, the biggest reason is our inability to deal with the pension crisis. And unfortunately, what the governor's proposed, I appreciate the fact that he's put stuff on the table. Right. It is, from our perspective, insufficient to address that problem.
Yeah, I mean, each side seems to have a proposal. Like the Republicans said, we'll give the governor $400 million that he wants for the school subsidy, but we're not going to do a shale tax. We'll use what they call recurring revenues. Right. And the governor says, well, that's just more budget gimmicks. the governor comes up with his proposal on pensions, up to $75,000 in income, you stay in the defined benefit program, right? And then above that, you can do a 401k, new employees 401k. So each side has given something, Fred, but every time then they come back to the table, it's like, well, you don't even have anything that we can talk about on the table. That's what seems so strange to me. And you've been through a lot of these. Is this different from these other negotiations that you were acutely aware of?
Of course it's different. It's very different. And it's different for the reason that the Republicans have such a large majority in the House, for one thing, and a majority of the Senate. So a few peeling off and putting pressure on the leaders to be more accommodated, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
I don't think the votes are there in these bodies, even if the leaders would get up and make a deal. I don't think they have the votes.
Yeah,
now,
that's a good
I
point.
think it's much more likely. I think it's what is being bandied about is the idea that the Democratic leaders in the caucuses in the Senate and the House will get together with the Republicans and make some sort of a deal on a budget, and then they'll get Wolf involved, and it'll be a veto. That's going to happen. That's what will happen.
You think? You look like you're in agreement.
There's a good chance of that. I think that there's a lot of discussion between Republicans and Democrats now. The Democrats back in their districts are feeling this. It was very interesting for those who watched the governor's comments after he lost that tax vote. I think everyone was surprised when he said it was a great victory. It certainly was not. It certainly showed that the votes aren't there. And as Fred says, they have come this far and get asked all the time, well, do you think they're still going to hang with it? Look, I don't detect any retrograde motion on behalf of the rank and file at all. We've come this far. We want to get liquor done. We want to get pensions done. On the severance tax, I think that there's been a reduction in the support for that because of the state of the industry right now.
All right, thanks. When we come back, we're going to spend a few minutes on a very important appeals court election. The Supreme Court news is, we're getting some news about it, but this is an extremely important election, and a lot of the voters aren't going to be aware of these candidates and what the issues are. If there are any issues, we'll get to that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
All right, Fred Anton and Gene Barr join me. Look, Fred Anton, we have a very important election for the state Supreme Court. 3 vacancies on the court. You have to go back to 1705. We're a colony to find 3 vacancies. These are extremely important elections. You're a lawyer. You've been following these elections for decades. What do you say about them at this point?
I say the major factor here, even though we're seeing reports that there's been some negative advertising against these judges on both sides, I say that the turnout is going to be the critical factor here. I think the turnout is going to determine the winners of these elections. And I think that this situation is very similar to an off-year election in the early 2000s where the Republicans won 7 of 7 because there was low turnout in Philadelphia, in the Democratic areas, and older Republicans in rural areas. And bear this in mind, other than the city of Philadelphia, the Democrats are poorly organized compared to the Republicans in getting out the vote in a lot of these rural areas.
It also matters. where there are contests for, municipal contests and county elections and which side turns out. I do agree. Fred's on to something. It's basically about which party turns out.
Right.
Gene, does this have an unusual importance? I know we have 5 people on the court right now. There's 7 total in the membership.
Right.
There are 5,
Correct.
3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. Does this composition matter as much as people think? I've thought over the years, except on a few issues, the court didn't strike me as overly partisan. You followed the court.
You know what? Just unfortunately, as we've seen our society and politics generally, it has migrated, I think, into the court as well. I mean, for years you had these sleepy appellate court elections, and all of us, because we watch this on a daily basis, paid some attention. And you're right, and that a lot of people still aren't. But there's been more attention here because of all the issues, the scandals, the resignations. There's been more attention, and as you note, this is historic in so many cases going back 300 years. We've got 3 Republicans running, 3 Democrats running, 1 independent running, and how all that is going to shake out will be very interesting. And because there are many things, from our perspective, the business community, rules of venue, that is where you hear these cases, is truly important.
That matters.
It matters greatly to us, and we're having tremendous issues with that across this Commonwealth, and it's something the Supreme Court needs to decide, and the makeup will determine that.
I feel very strongly about this. I feel very strongly that the people who are supporting and coming up with the big money in these elections are trial lawyers and labor unions. They are universally supporting the Democrats. And I think these Democratic judges, if they've taken substantial money, there's a cloud over how they might vote. I have found that even though the court has been dominated by Republicans, particularly the votes of Justice Castile have been down the middle and have not been particularly partisan.
Does it matter that they get these 10-year terms and after they're up for retention? In other words, you're elected in a partisan election and you go 10 years and it's yes or no. Does that diminish at all over the long term? I mean, one of the I don't want to filibuster here, but one of the points that Fred makes is an argument for why we should substitute election for an appointed system. We're the only 5 states in the United States still elect all their judges. Right. Is Fred on to something?
Well, that bill's moving.
That?
I mean, the merit selection bill came out of House committee this week. We support it. We think it makes a lot of sense, particularly when you see these kinds of things. And there have been issues with merit selection in other states. We think we've worked that out. It has to be changed constitutionally here. And it would not affect common pleas. You would still vote to elect your common pleas. You'd still vote to elect your district justice. Right. But for Superior, Commonwealth, and Supreme, we think it makes a lot of sense.
But the point here is that regardless of whether Democrats or Republicans are doing it, if lawyers contribute, law firms that have cases before the courts, I'm not suggesting that there's anything illegal or illicit, but doesn't it have the appearance, Fred?
The appearance,
appearance of an impropriety?
It has more than the appearance of impropriety. It has many, many situations where there has been impropriety tied to contributions, and it can be documented in Pennsylvania, particularly with Justice McCafferty, who left the court under a cloud.
Right.
So it's not theoretical. Plaintiffs' trial lawyers are their incomes are related to outcomes of cases. If they don't win the case, they don't get their contingent fee. They're directly related to the results of the cases. The defendant's trial lawyers aren't. They get paid by the hour.
All right. Thanks for coming in. Sure. We'll see you next month for another update. All right, coming back, we have Terry Fitzpatrick. The outlook on your energy heating bills are going to be: you're going to pay more, you're going to pay less. We'll find out in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Well, you can get your energy bills out, your electric bills, your heating bills. Terry Fitzpatrick, who's sitting across from me, just smiled. He's the president and CEO of the Energy Association of PA. He's our expert. We call in on all these things. All right, I'm going to take a wild guess. Gas prices down, petroleum, natural gas. You'll tell me about electricity. We're going to pay less this year in the course of the winter, right or wrong?
Well, that's why I'm smiling, Terry.
I figured.
Of course.
You were.
The outlook is good. The outlook is very good. And the Energy Information Administration of the federal government, nonpartisan group, just tries to give you data. And their outlook was released a couple weeks ago, and it's good because prices are down. It's basic economics in energy, supply and demand. We have great new supplies with the Marcellus, and that's helping to hold down prices for natural gas, obviously, but also electricity, which is largely dependent on natural gas now for generation. But also, prices of other fuels. Heating oil's down, which is good news. We have a lot of heating oil customers in Pennsylvania. Propane's down. So the outlook is good. The outlook is good.
That means, of course, more money to spend on shopping over the holidays, right?
That's right. That's good news for all you kids out there.
Yeah, good news for all you kids. That's right. To get the Legos
if you've been
out.
Good.
If you've been good. Yeah, that's wonderful. And so, I mean, you always have the possibility of some disruption somewhere in terms of where we get the oil, but it typically doesn't look like at the moment that we'll see any of that, does it? Now, we don't know for sure.
Well, let me say, everything, whenever you're talking about energy, you better hedge your bets because there's uncertainties and things that you can't predict. While the outlook is good, there's still the potential, if we have a cold snap like we did a couple of years ago, for prices to spike temporarily, and that's a concern depending upon what kind of pricing plans you have with buying your electricity. Found that out a couple of years ago.
And we'll get to that.
There's still the potential for that, and really that's a phenomena which is particularly true in the northeastern part of the United States, because while the supplies are great, the infrastructure, when we get to peak demand, is really not adequate to get things where they need to go. Now, that's being worked on with pipelines, but there's a bottleneck going into the Northeast, and that really includes the eastern half of Pennsylvania.
Now, does that mean lower prices for us because the natural gas is here? I don't know what it has to do with petroleum. As you know, we get our petroleum from Canada, Mexico, and one of the countries in South America that eludes me. I wanted to say Argentina.
Venezuela?
Venezuela, yeah. I think that's where we get. So other than dislocation there,
well, I'm talking about probably primarily natural gas and electricity, because there's a bottleneck on infrastructure heading into the Northeast. And that includes, if you look at the prices where they fall out at different pricing points, it includes the eastern part of Pennsylvania. Western PA is different. That's more like the Midwest and other areas to the south. But eastern Pennsylvania, because there are some bottlenecks on the gas pipelines getting gas into that part of the country and up into New England, at times if it gets very cold, there's still the potential for prices to temporarily go quite high if that kind of thing happens.
Okay. All right, I'm chatting with Terry Fitzpatrick. We're going to run to a break. We're going to talk about all these choices that you have about where you get your, is it energy? Is that right? Or yeah, I guess it is. It's energy in some form, right?
Correct.
Well, Terry's the expert. We'll chat with him about that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
Terry Fitzpatrick from the Energy Association of Pennsylvania is here. We're talking about all things energy. We got some great tips on, well, I don't know if it's a tip, but we're going to play less when you get those electric bills out and the gas heating bills. All right, we all have to make a choice of where we get this energy from, correct?
Well, you don't have to make a choice.
Oh, that's true.
But not
that's
making
true.
a choice is kind of making a choice. Yes.
Good point.
Yes. You have the ability to choose who you buy your supplies from with regard to electricity and natural gas. Or you can stay with the utility, which gives you what I would say is a fair deal too, because they're buying it. Utilities, whether we're talking about gas or electric, they don't produce the electricity or gas. That's done by other segments of the industry. So the utilities will buy it for you and sell you those supplies if you don't choose to go out and shop around.
Okay.
And you're getting a fair deal from the utility. They're going
regulated.
out.
Let me ask you, you're a former member of you're chairman of the Pennsylvania Utilities Commission.
Correct.
They're regulated, right? They
Yes.
can't get price increases unless they justify them before.
Well, that's correct. You have to
that.
file a traditional rate case for your wires or your pipes costs. With regard to the supplies, there's a separate process set up. But yes, it's overseen by the PUC, and the utilities go out into the market and get the best price they can for customers. Mm-hmm. And they buy in a way that keeps the price relatively stable, too. So we talked about spikes in these wholesale markets a minute ago. You won't feel that immediately if you're on the utilities supply option, because they ladder the contracts, as they say, so that they're hedged so it doesn't go immediately up your price.
So what would your hints be, excuse me, to our viewers out there? When it comes due or they get the option to change and they have, oh my gosh, you look at all these, they don't. It's hard to understand.
Right.
What should they do?
Well, there are good websites. The PUC has good websites, Power Switch and Gas Switch, where you can go in, you can put your zip code in, you can see the suppliers that are making offers to you, and you can see what their price is compared to what the utility charges for electricity or gas. On the electric side, the basic things you want to pay attention to is what kind of rate are you being offered? Is it a fixed rate or a variable rate?
I want to stop you there. That's important.
Yes.
Reiterate that. And why is it important?
Well, with the variable rate, basically you're going to have flowed through to you whatever's happening in the wholesale market, and that is much more subject to going up and down.
Up and down. So
if you can take that risk, fine. I think most small customers don't want to take that risk. They want more stability than that. But it is an option that you have. So let's say you say, I want a fixed rate. Well, then you have to see how long is it fixed. A lot of these offers are only fixed for 3 months. Some of them are fixed for a year and a half, 2 or 3 years perhaps. So that's the other thing you need to pay attention to.
Thanks for coming. I want you to come in a month or so from now and give us an update, and we'll see what's going on. It's very important. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.